Okay, so today we're going to be learning about another explorer who sailed for England. And this explorer, just like we learned from last Thursday, was somebody who was looking for the Northwest Passage. And remember, the Northwest Passage was a thing that people thought existed, which was a way from people to get from Europe all the way to India, sailing across the globe. So they thought there might be a way to sneak past and get to India. And one thing that I want you to do before we start our reading today, which as you can see is in our reading, you are going to do a quick write, which means you're going to take a couple seconds to write down your thoughts. So we're going to make a prediction. We're going to write down, why do we think England would still be sending explorers to North America 100 years after John Cabot failed to find a Northwest Passage? Okay, I'm going to write it here. Why do you think England, oops, that's not where I want to write it. Why do you think England would still be sending explorers to North America 100 years after John Cabot failed to find a Northwest Passage? Okay, you're going to write a prediction. I'm going to write one too, and I'm going to give you exactly, let's say 2 or 3 minutes to write your quick write. Okay, and go. So are you done? I just finished my writing, and this is my prediction. And to be fair, I'm kind of cheating because I know some of this stuff already. I said that I think England would still be sending explorers because they didn't know the shape of North America, and they still thought there was a way people might be able to get to India. It took a lot of exploring before they could create the maps we see today. So remember that any map that you see today of the world, people didn't always know what the world looked like, and it took a lot of explorers and people going all over the globe in their ships to figure out where all of the islands are and where North America is and everything. So back then they didn't know what the world looked like, and they thought maybe we just missed it and we couldn't find the Northwest Passage. So that's my quick write. Make sure you share your quick write with somebody. And I'm going to get started on our reading. Zoom in on the picture here a little bit. John Cabot was not the only person who wanted to find a Northwest Passage to the Indies. English explorer Henry Hudson had the same goal. Very little is known about Henry Hudson's early life, but we do know he had an interest in exploring Arctic geography. Hudson made his first attempt to find the Northwest Passage in 1607, more than 100 years after Cabot made his voyages. Hudson's idea about how he might get to the Indies was similar to Cabot's. Hudson's idea was to sail north, right over the North Pole. He knew the polar region was cold and icy, but he also knew that the sun never set during the summer months. He thought the summer sun might melt a lot of the ice, making it possible to sail over the top of the earth and come out on the other side of the world in Asia. In May of 1607, Hudson embarked from England with a single ship called the Hopewell. 6 weeks later, his men sighted the eastern coast of Greenland. Hudson sailed along the eastern coast of Greenland and then turned and sailed northeast because there was so much ice. During their voyage, he and his men saw many unfamiliar creatures, including whales, seals, and walruses. In mid-July, they reached the Spitsbergen Archipelago, which is a chain of islands that has an Arctic climate. When Hudson tried to navigate this region, it was surrounded by pack ice, or frozen seawater. On May 16, Hudson's ship almost got stuck in the ice. For a while, it was touch and go. A few days later, Hudson decided he could not reach the North Pole because of all of the ice. He turned around and sailed back to England. In 1608, Hudson made a second attempt to reach the East Indies by sailing the Hopewell across the North Pole. He sailed north of Scandinavia and Russia. He sailed more than 2,500 miles, making it to the islands off the coast of Russia known as Novaya Zemlya, which means new land. But again, there was so much ice in the water that he had to turn back. In 1609, Hudson made a third attempt to find the Northwest Passage. This time, he sailed for the Dutch under the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company was a trading company that formed to protect their trade in the East Indies. The company hired Hudson and told him to follow a similar route he had attempted in his previous voyage, sailing north of Scandinavia and Russia. The hope was that he would be able to sail over the top of the earth and land in Asia. Hudson left Amsterdam, the Netherlands, in April of 1609 on board the Dutch ship the Half Moon. As he made his way north, he saw more and more ice. Eventually, there was so much ice that Hudson decided to give up and turn around in mid-May. Instead of sailing back to Amsterdam, as he had been told to, Hudson decided to sail west. Hudson sailed across the Atlantic and sighted Newfoundland on July 12th. He sailed along the coast of North America, exploring much of what is now the east coast of the United States. He and his men sailed as far south as Virginia, where the Jamestown settlement had recently been established. Then they turned north. So this map is kind of hard to read, but I am going to point it out to you just to help you understand his voyages a little bit. This right here is Europe, and this is England, this island here. And this is North America, so like this is where Massachusetts would be today, and this is like where Maine would be today. And he was trying to get over the top of the earth to get to India. So this is the Arctic, like the North Pole kind of. And he sailed up north, and he was trying to get all the way over the top. But he had to stop every time because of all this ice. Because the North Pole is not just water, it's ice. It's frozen, so the ship couldn't go any further. And so he stopped in Greenland once, which is basically just a huge landmass covered in ice. He stopped in some of these islands. This is Iceland right here. And then a couple times he went over to North America and tried to go this way, but of course he couldn't go any further that way either. On September 3rd, they came upon a large river that emptied into the Atlantic. Hudson and his men explored the river, sailing upstream. When Hudson saw the river widening out, he thought the river he was exploring might be the Northwest Passage that he and explorers before him had been seeking for years. Farther upstream, the river narrowed, and Hudson began to think maybe it would not lead through the continent. Nevertheless, it was an interesting discovery. Hudson claimed the area for the Netherlands and the Dutch. Hudson and his crew encountered many Native Americans of the Algonquin-speaking tribes of their trip up the river. Some Native Americans tried to attack them, but others visited the ship to trade. The Indians offered furs to Hudson in trade, and this started the fur trade along the Hudson River. One group invited Hudson to dinner. Later, Hudson described what he had experienced in his journal. I sailed to the shore in one of their canoes, with an old man who was the chief of a tribe consisting of 40 men and 17 women. These I saw there, in a house well constructed of oak bark, and circular in shape, so that it had the appearance of being built with an arched roof. It contained a great quantity of maize, or Indian corn, and beans of the last year's growth, and there lay near the house, for the purpose of drying, enough to load 3 ships, besides what was growing in the fields. On our coming into the house, 2 mats were spread out to sit upon, and some food was immediately served in well-made red wooden bowls. 2 men brought in a pair of pigeons, which they had shot. They supposed that I would remain with them for the night, but I returned, after a short time, on board the ship. The land is the finest for cultivation that I ever in my life set foot upon, and it also abounds in trees of every description. These natives are a very good people, for when they saw that I would not remain, they supposed that I was afraid of their bows, and, taking their arrows, they broke them in pieces and threw them into the fire. In late September, Hudson decided to sail back to Europe. He himself wanted to stay in the New World for the winter, but his men were tired of exploring, and they were threatening to mutiny. Mutiny means that they're going to revolt and say, "We're going to do a revolution." The river that Hudson discovered on his 3rd voyage was later named after him. Even today it is known as the Hudson River. Other Dutchmen came to this part of the world after Hudson. They built a city at the mouth of the Hudson River, on an island the Indians called Mannahatta. The Dutch called this city New Amsterdam. Later, its name was changed to New York. Today, Manhattan is the name of one of the parts of New York City, and New York City is the most populous city in the United States. In 1610, Hudson set off on a fourth voyage. This time, he was sponsored by two English companies, the Virginia Company and the British East India Company. Similar to the Dutch East India Company, these companies were also trading companies. Hudson's goal was the same, to find a northwest passage, a water route that would lead through the American continent and allowed ships to sail to Asia. Hudson sailed west, but he stayed far to the north. He reached Greenland in early June. A few weeks later, he and his men found a large strait that led into the center of North America. Hudson hoped it might lead all the way to Asia. On August 2nd, Hudson sailed out of the strait into a large bay. Today, this bay is known as the Hudson Bay, and the strait is known as the Hudson Strait. Hudson spent the next few months exploring the coast of the bay. In November, his ship got stuck in the ice. He and his crew had to go ashore for the winter. It was a difficult, freezing cold winter. The men were fighting with Hudson as well as one another. Several of them fell ill with scurvy, a disease that preys on people who have not been eating a healthy, balanced diet. When spring came, Hudson wanted to explore some more. Most of the men on the ship wanted to sail back to England. A big fight broke out. In the end, the sailors mutinied. They put Hudson, his son, and some others they did not like in a small open boat and sailed away. Henry Hudson, the great explorer, was never heard from again. Wow, that's a pretty intense ending, right? His sailors left Hudson in a little rowboat and they abandoned him and sailed away. And that was the last anybody ever saw of Hudson. Kind of sad. All right. So what you're going to do next is you actually do not need to do a activity page today, but I am going to be giving you some questions to answer in a Nearpod, so please make sure you answer those questions. And then what you're going to do is you are going to go to your activity book and open up activity page 10.1, and you're going to reread the chapter, and you have two choices. You can either answer this activity page, which is more of a challenging one, so if you want to challenge yourself, do this one. Or if this one is too hard, you can do activity page 10.2, which means you're going to pick some vocabulary words that you didn't know. And I mean it, don't just pick ones that you know, but pick ones you don't know. And put them in the boxes here and tell me what they mean and use them in a sentence. You can use the glossary. So your choices are activity page 10.2 or activity page 10.1. Okay, good luck.